In July 2025, Russian social media showcased videos of massive orange fireballs erupting above refineries far from Ukraine. Russia's energy empire began to dim, not due to sanctions, but from Ukrainian drones. What started as a few cross-border strikes has transformed into a persistent campaign targeting the core of Russia's oil industry. This is HM Intelligence. Today we're examining how Ukraine is systematically dismantling Russia's oil infrastructure, a campaign that has reshaped both the war in Ukraine and the wider geopolitical map. Before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a video. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the world expected brutal land battles, not an oil war. But by April, the first sign of a different kind of fight appeared. 2 Ukrainian helicopters flew low across the border and bombed a fuel depot in Belgorod, about 35 kilometers from Ukraine. The strike was bold, unexpected, and symbolic, the first air attack on Russian soil since the Second World War. Later that spring, massive fires erupted at oil facilities in Bryansk and Rostov. At the time, Russia called them accidents, but the pattern suggested something new. Kyiv was probing Russia's logistical heart. By June, a Ukrainian drone slammed into Novostok refinery near the border, igniting an explosion that forced a shutdown of the 7.5 million ton a year plant. Ukraine's message was clear: the Moscow home front was no longer safe. What began as isolated raids marked the birth of a strategic campaign, one that would mature into an organized assault on Russia's ability to wage war. Throughout 2023, Ukraine transformed those early experiments into a sustained offensive. Its engineers developed new generations of long-range drones, capable of flying hundreds, even thousands of kilometers. In February 2023, a swarm of Ukrainian drones struck a Rosenfit oil depot in Tupasi on Russia's Black Sea coast, nearly 500 kilometers from Ukrainian-held territory. For the first time, deep strike capability was proven. Over the following months, refineries and fuel depots from the Caucasus to the Moscow region came under repeated attack. In the Krasnodar area alone, 2 refineries were hit several times, each time halting operations for days. By late 2023, analysts counted more than 80 separate strikes on Russian oil infrastructure. Even sites deep inside the country, the Agarsky refinery in Siberia, tank farms near Moscow, saw mysterious fires. Ukraine also targeted occupied Crimea's fuel lifeline. In April 2023, an enormous explosion tore through an oil depot in Sevastopol, crippling naval logistics in the Black Sea. The following year, 2024, brought both acceleration and collaboration. Early in the year, Ukraine launched dozens of attacks in a single month, hitting targets as far as the Black Sea coast. Western intelligence quietly helped to improve their targeting data. But by March, Washington had privately asked Kyiv to pause these attacks. The United States was worried that striking too many refineries could spike global oil prices and fracture diplomatic support. For a few months, Ukraine focused on frontline logistics instead. By mid-summer, the pause was ended. Drones once again struck Russian energy assets. The campaign had become more disciplined, strong enough to keep pressure on Moscow, careful enough to avoid alienating partners. Then came 2025, the year Ukraine's oil offensive became a full-scale second front. By this time, Kyiv had established a dedicated unmanned system forces command under Colonel Robert Medyabrovdy. These units coordinated waves of long-range drone attacks targeting Russia's refineries, pipelines, and export terminals. By August 2025, Ukraine was striking deep inside Russian territory almost every night. Independent monitors recorded at least 58 attacks that month alone, an unprecedented number. Refineries like Ryazan, Slavant, and Sarzan were hit multiple times, each strike timed to prevent repairs. When the Druzhba pipeline's Unicha pumping station in Bryansk was bombed twice in 1 week, oil flows to Hungary and Slovakia stopped for several days, a signal that even Russia's export arteries were vulnerable. Cyber operations expanded the battlefield further. In July 2025, Ukrainian hackers infiltrated Gazprom's network, wiping databases and disrupting pipeline controls. According to Ukrainian intelligence, it sent Gazprom back to the technological Middle Ages. By October, analysts described the campaign as a systemic factor in the war. What had started with one helicopter raid in Belgorod was now a coordinated effort combining drones, sabotage, cyber attacks, and psychological warfare. The logic behind Ukraine's campaign is brutally simple. Fuel drives war. No fuel, no offensive, no resupply, and no air attack. Many of the first targets, Belgorod, Bryansk, Rostov, were key supply hubs for feeding Russian forces in Ukraine. Their destruction forced Russia to reroute convoys and caused catastrophic shortages at the front. When the Kerch Bridge exploded in October 2022, severing the rail line to Crimea and igniting a train of fuel tankers, it inflicted both a logistical and psychological blow. Russian troops were suddenly more dependent on longer, more exposed routes along the Azov coast. Repeated refinery attacks in southern Russia and Crimea disrupted diesel and aviation fuel supplies, forcing the Kremlin to shift fuel from distant regions. The result was friction, delays, reduced operational tempo, and higher vulnerability of these supply lines. Beyond the battlefield, Russia has begun to feel the strain at home. By late 2023, after a wave of refinery hits, several regions faced fuel shortages. Long queues formed at gas stations. And in September 2023, Moscow imposed a near-total ban on diesel and gasoline exports to keep the domestic market supplied. An extraordinary measure that revealed the campaign's effectiveness. Analysts estimate refinery output fell about 10% that year, pushing retail fuel prices up by a similar margin. Every litre used to calm domestic markets was a litre diverted from the war effort. By 2025, the economic cost has been staggering. Simultaneous attacks in August caused a shutdown of an estimated 1.4 million barrels per day of refining capacity, roughly 1/5 of Russia's total. Each day a refinery stayed offline meant millions in lost revenue and repair costs. Equipment under sanctions cannot easily be replaced. Parts like catalysts and control valves are in short supply. Independent analysts estimate the total damage from late 2024 to early 2025 at roughly 60 billion rubles, around $700 million US, and that's only the direct, visible destruction. Repeated attacks also scare away investment. Western oil companies have already left Russia. Now, even domestic firms are hesitant to pour money into facilities that might burn again next week. In essence, Ukraine has achieved what sanctions alone could not: immediate and undeniable. Oil and gas revenue makes up nearly a third of Russia's state budget. As refining and exports falter, Moscow is facing a dilemma: fund the war or stabilize the economy. To cushion domestic fuel prices, the Kremlin has spent billions subsidizing refineries and transport. That money could otherwise fund weapons or soldiers' pay. The result is a subtle but growing strain on Russia's fiscal stability. Analysts now project that the continued disruption could push the Russian government into a constrained budget by 2026, forcing cuts elsewhere. Ukraine, meanwhile, is turning Russia's greatest strength into its greatest vulnerability. Ukraine's campaign has not gone unnoticed. It has sparked quiet debates in Western capitals, grumbling from Moscow's allies, and careful monitoring by global energy markets. From the start, the United States and NATO have balanced moral support for Ukraine with fears of escalation. Officially, Washington only recently confirmed its involvement in providing intelligence in these cross-border strikes. But reporting shows that since 2024, Western intelligence has been discreetly aiding target selection. The underlying rule has been consistent: no Western-supplied weapons for strikes inside Russia proper. Ukraine's drones, built and launched domestically, provide the West's deniability. Back in March 2024, US diplomats privately urged Kyiv to moderate its attacks to avoid spikes in oil prices. But in 2025, that caution has eased. Under the Trump administration, intelligence sharing has reportedly increased, and Zelensky claims open acknowledgement of Ukraine's right to target Russian energy infrastructure. For Washington and its allies, the calculus is pragmatic. Each burning refinery weakens Moscow without a single Western soldier firing a shot. Moscow has labelled the strikes as terrorism, but its protests ring hollow. Under international law, fuel facilities supplying an active invading force are legitimate military targets. Russia's closest partners, China, India, and others in the global south, have responded with studied neutrality. They call for de-escalation by all sides, while quietly continuing to buy discounted Russian crude. Only Hungary and Slovakia, temporarily affected by a pipeline shutdown, have lodged strong protest. The European Union has moved to secure alternate supplies, preventing lasting diplomatic rifts within the bloc. So far, the global energy system has absorbed the shock. Sanctions have already rerouted Russian exports towards Asia, and the world's shadow fleet of tankers have cushioned disruptions. However, the strikes have reshaped trade flows. Europe and parts of Asia are already diversifying more rapidly, while Russia is increasingly reliant on risky, long supply chains with lower margins for crude sales. Over time, its reputation as a reliable supplier is eroding, a slow burn strategic loss. Militarily, Ukraine's oil campaign is degrading Russia's ability to sustain high-intensity operations. Strategically, it forces Moscow into a defensive crouch, diverting air defences, troops, and resources to protect its vast interior. Politically, it undermines the Kremlin's image of control. Fires, visible from Moscow's suburbs, remind ordinary Russians that the war they started can reach them too. Economically, it constrains the very resource base funding the war. Each refinery repair, each lost export contract, chips away at Russia's long-term capacity to fight. And diplomatically, it gives Ukraine leverage. When negotiations eventually come, and they will, Kyiv will hold a powerful card, the proven ability to hit the lifeblood of Russia's economy at will. 3 years after the invasion began, Ukraine has turned innovation into strategy. Without air superiority or a blue water navy, it found another way to project power: drones, sabotage, and cyber warfare targeting Russia's oil empire. The campaign's results are tangible: refinery outages, domestic fuel shortages, and billions in lost revenue. But beyond the statistics lies a deeper transformation. Ukraine has redefined what it means to fight a superior opponent. By hitting pipelines and refineries instead of tanks and trenches, Kyiv is waging a war of attrition on Russia's economic foundations. The effect is cumulative, slow but strategic, wearing down the war machine from within. For Russia, the outlook is grim. Its vast geography, once guaranteed security, now guarantees exposure. Thousands of kilometers of pipelines, depots, and refineries must be defended, and they can't all be. For Ukraine, the challenge will be sustainability. Each drone and each strike consumes resources and must carefully husband. Western support, intelligence sharing, and continued domestic innovation will determine whether the campaign remains effective into 2026. But the direction is clear. Russia's oil wealth, once the engine of its war, has become a liability. As one Ukrainian commander put it, we're not just burning their fuel, we're burning their future. This has been HM Intelligence. If you found this video useful, consider subscribing and turning notifications on. I'll see you next time. See you!